That's what I love about home birth too, is it seems like they don't want bad outcomes. They don't want emergencies, like they can handle them if it happens, but they don't want that. And so like
Hmm.
they're preparing you for like the best possible outcome. Or with like OBs, they have all the safety nets. Like we have a NICU, we have cesareans, we have all this stuff. So like do whatever you want, do the
Hmm.
testing that we want you to do, but like we don't care what you're eating or what, how you're preparing your body. And that's what even my friends who are like planning hospital births, I'm like, I know midwives that do prenatal care for people who aren't birthing with them. I'm like, you should do that because it's vastly different. Like 90 minutes
Hmm.
of talking with your provider versus 15 minutes, and they're navigating like how to prevent something that happened to your birth before, or like to work with your labs to get things better. Like no matter how many times you have a baby, it's your one chance. It's your one time being pregnant with this child and having your labor and birth with this child, and you should be
Hmm.
putting all this energy and focus and intention because this is your one shot at it.
Hey, you're listening to Empowered Births at Home with me, Esmeralda, as your host. I am a mama of three, fellow home birther, and doula. I am completely obsessed with birth, more specifically, home birth. And this is the podcast where women come to share their home birth stories, along with the journey that led them down the path to home birth. Whether you're pregnant, planning a home birth with your first or fourth baby, or even is just someone who is a complete birth nerd like me, this is the podcast for you. Let's get right into this week's empowering home birth story.
My name is Allie. I live in Duluth, Minnesota, so up by Lake Superior with my husband. We have two boys. Evander just turned 4, and Oslo is 18 months, and we're expecting our third baby in June. And I've had home births with my first two, and we're planning a third home birth with this new baby.
Mhm.
I'm
Yeah,
a massage therapist, so I do like a ton of prenatal massages. They're like my favorite.
hmm Yeah, that's amazing. And so, how did you get onto the path of choosing home birth? What kind of made that your final decision?
So I honestly think it started, I knew I wanted a home birth since I was like a teenager.
Mm,
Nobody in my family or in my life has had home birth since like my great grandmothers. And I grew up on a farm and we had pigs being born, and it was my favorite thing to be able to help them like catch their babies and fluff them up. And it just amazed me every time. And then I did like most home birth moms, watch The Business of Being Born. I used to love watching A Baby Story on TLC.
hmm
And then I'd also done a couple of my anatomy class like projects on childbirth and midwifery. So I had been doing research to do those projects as well. And it just always fascinated me. So when I got pregnant, it was just no question. Like I already knew that that was what I was going to do.
hmm
Yeah. And my
Was
husband was totally on board for it.
mm, yeah, that's amazing. Was there ever any back and forth in your mind because of maybe like outside sources? Because it's not the norm that people will have a home birth, especially with their first. Did you ever have any like pushback from family, friends?
Not really. I think most people, like when I told them, they're like, oh, that makes sense, just based
Mm,
on like I've always, before I had babies, was just like so fascinated and be like telling my friends, like, did you know this about birth? Or so I don't think any of them are really surprised. I also feel like I spoke really confidently about my plan to home birth, and like had already researched so much that I knew why I didn't want to birth inside the system. And so it kind of like shut people down, I think, whenever they, like we're like, really, is that really what you want to do? Or what are you going to do if it hurts? I'm just like, people have been doing it for so long. Like we've had pain management for such a short amount of human existence that
hmm
I wasn't worried about it, and other people's like views didn't really bother me. And my husband, I don't remember if he knew that I was really interested in birth. I actually practiced like my hour-long oral presentation for massage school on him and our male roommate. So like he
mm
already got like all that information from that. And so
hmm
when we found out we were pregnant, I was like, this is what I want to do. I already know like a couple midwives that I want to interview. And so the day after I told him, we called Margot, the first midwife that I thought I wanted,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of talked to her, briefly. But she's like, you want to interview more and then make your decision, which I really loved that she had done that instead of, like saying, okay, like I'll just take you guys. She like wanted us to make sure that we aligned with her and that it felt like the right
Yeah.
fit for us. And I'd interviewed another midwife similar to her, and then a midwife that was more medicalized. And right away, at the more medicalized one, I just knew that it was just not what I wanted. Margot was a traditional unlicensed midwife, which I knew that that was kind of the route I wanted to go. I wanted her to serve me and my family and not adhere to rules that people that don't do anything with birth have made for midwives. I like obviously she wouldn't take me if I had a risky birth or labor or pregnancy or anything like that. So I was confident in her. I was confident in my body. And yeah, like from day, whatever, week 5, I had a midwife, a home birth
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's
midwife.
amazing. I love that. And what did you do to kind of prep for this home birth? What did that kind of look like?
Yeah. So since I had like already been researching so much over the years, I kind of was like, I read Spiritual Midwifery again, Ina May's Guide to Breastfeeding and Childbirth, Birthing from Within. Like it just, I mean, I didn't have any other kids, so I had all that time to research, which I
Mm-hmm.
haven't had with my last 2 pregnancies. So I did that. I did do dual care. So I don't typically go to the doctor. And so I felt like maybe it was smart to do care with the hospital up until 20 weeks in that anatomy scan so that I had some rapport and a relationship with somebody. And then if I needed to go to the hospital for whatever reason, they had something on me or I had some kind of relationship with them. So
Yeah.
I went to, there's 2 local hospitals, and I went to one of them. And that was fine until I told them I was having a home birth.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had also denied some testing. So I did the finger pokes with my home birth midwife. I denied the diabetes testing at the hospital. I denied the Group B strep test as well. And then I had whoever it was, the medical assistant or whomever was doing it, got really frustrated with me and said, your baby could die if you don't do this. And I was very solid in my plan to have a home birth. I had done all the research. I knew, kind of how most hospitals operate, but I was still like susceptible to that type of bullying. And so I like pushed back and then I was like, fine, you can do it, but whatever you find isn't going to matter to me because I have this other plan. Um, and then when they did the swab, it was super violent, really painful. And then they just
Mm-hmm.
left. And then they came back and they're like, you might have some bleeding. And I bled for like 2 or 3 days after that. And I just felt so frustrated because going in, I knew this isn't what I wanted. And I knew I needed to stand up for myself, but I still like was victim to that. And then we had our 20-week ultrasound, which is going to be my last appointment. If like everything was fine with baby, as far as like I wasn't concerned about breech or anything like that at that point, but like as long as the organs were inside the baby's body and their brain looked like it was formed right, then I was just going to stop at the no more hospital appointments and just go with my midwife.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as I told the OB, she's like, everything looks perfect, your baby looks perfect. And then I was like, well, we're planning a home birth, so this will be my last time seeing you in case I end up transferred or whatever. And she said, she's like, well, in that case, we need to talk about your baby's kidneys, and the ureters are narrowed. And if you don't get ultrasounds right before they're born or right after, your baby could have these big problems. And
Mm-hmm.
then she was just really like saying that my midwife wouldn't be able to help me if I had a breech or a shoulder dystocia and all this stuff, and how hospital was going to be safest for me. And I just got really mad because she just told me everything was perfect. And then when I told her my plan was different than the plan she had for me, now they were concerned. So I was like, either you lied to me to begin with or you're lying to me now. And my home birth
Mm-hmm.
midwife actually said that this midwife has done this to other clients of my midwives, or this OB has done this to other clients of my midwives. Same
Mm-hmm.
exact story. And so then I just didn't go back to the hospital. I did my normal like prenatals with Margot. I took like a traditional midwife or prenatal that had methylated folate, but it was like the Smarty Pants brand. And I ate healthy, but I wasn't like tracking anything. I was just like eating healthy, non processed foods. I didn't really prep my birth space. I felt like I I don't know. I felt like it was like silly. Like I was like, oh, well, animals just do it wherever they are. And I don't need to have twinkly lights and I don't need to have, I don't know why I felt silly. And so I didn't prep any of that. I did meal prepping for postpartum and I hired a doula. My midwife had suggested having a doula for my first birth because she's just like, you just don't know, what you might need. And my husband picked her because I didn't feel like I needed one, but he wanted one because he's like, what if I have to go to the bathroom? And
Mm,
like, I don't want to just leave you, with nobody. So
yeah.
doula was more so for him. So actually, we had our midwife and her apprentice, and then the apprentice's sister was our doula.
Mm,
So we had three people attending our birth. And my pregnancy was easy. I didn't really have any big complaints. It was during COVID and I was off of work for 2.5 months. So I was
mm,
outside all the time and hiking. And it was actually like really nice to be pregnant during COVID. And the only weird symptom I had is my butt was turning my toilet seat blue in the bottom of my tub. And that was
mm,
like, my husband and I were like, what are we like? I don't wear jeans, so it wasn't like blue dye.
mhm.
And that was really the only like confusing thing. But other than that, it was a beautiful pregnancy and I loved it.
Yeah, amazing. And so going into that birth, what were kind of the first signs that you had of labor and go into how that led up to the birth?
Yeah. So I'm a massage therapist and my first appointments are at like 7:45, 8 a.m. in the morning. So it's 6 a.m. I was getting ready for work. It was 3 days before my guest date. And I feel so calm at the end of my pregnancies. It's just like I have this sense of peace wash over me. I wasn't anxious for labor to start. I wasn't ready for my pregnancy to be over. So I was up at like 6 and I just had like a robe on with no underwear. And I was walking in my kitchen and it was just like a movie theater like movie gush. And I was so confused because I had heard so many times that that's not normal. Like
Mhm.
you have like a little trickle. And I was just like, what? And then I started peeing because I thought I was peeing. So I'm like, I might as well just keep it all on the kitchen floor. And I texted the midwife and I was like, I think my water broke, like it
Mhm.
looks clear. And I ended up calling into work and she's like, well, just like let me know, if anything changes, if you're feeling any surges or anything. She's like, she was basically just like, don't put anything in your vagina so you don't get like any infections or anything. But she wasn't concerned about now that there's a clock started. She just
Yeah.
like, it could just be mystery fluid and we'll just see what happens as the days go. So I actually didn't have, so 6 a.m., my husband and I just like relaxed all day. I woke him up when my water broke because I'm like, my water broke, it's starting. But then
Mhm.
nothing happened all day, like nothing at all. No more water leaked out, no contractions, nothing. And then I was going to bed around midnight and I felt like a really hard, what I thought was a Braxton Hick contraction. And I didn't really think anything of it because it was just one and then nothing else happened. And I went to bed, but then I was up like every hour to go to the bathroom. And I'm thinking now, like in hindsight, that I was probably having a contraction and that's what woke me up. And then I just thought I had to go to the bathroom. So that happened about like every hour until 6 a.m. So it's been 24 hours since my water broke. And I started like counting them on my contraction app and they're coming about 5 to 7 minutes apart. And I didn't want to wake Matt up again early because he had been up early the day before. So I was like, I'll just, like get through these on my own. I went downstairs and like ate some toast, started like cleaning up, getting like stuff ready for the birth, which I should have just rested, but I was excited and I trust Matt, but I also didn't trust him to do the things how I wanted them done. So I was trying to do everything. And then I woke him up at 7 a.m. And then I called the doula and the midwife and just let them know that my contractions had started. Matt went to blow up the birth pool and it had a hole in it. So it's always like drama with the birth pool.
Yeah.
Just trying to focus on deep breathing. I was humming low, rocking and swaying really felt good. And then the midwives were like asking like when I felt like I needed them there. And I just really felt unsure as to like, is this going to get harder or is this really early stuff still? And we decided to just have them come and just check on me and see what they thought. And then the doula's house isn't very far from mine. So they're like, we can just go hang out there and give you some space while you are in labor. So they showed up. I ate some soup for lunch. And then I started getting like into the active labor phase, and I was throwing up with like every contraction almost. I went into our bathtub, and I was like laboring in there for a little bit while they were getting the pool set up, and I like threw up like kale soup like all over myself. And they're like, the pool is ready. And my husband's like, do you want to shower off before you go downstairs? And I was like, no, I'm fine. and and he, like, when I was in like later on in labor, I was like, do I smell? He's like, no, you don't smell. But then he told me, like, after the baby was born, he's like, yeah, you had like kale like stuck to your neck. And I was like so grateful that he hadn't told me that like in that moment. But we have like a landing on our stairs. So I like made it down to the landing, and then I had like a super hard contraction on the landing. And then when that one ended, I like went down and got into the pool. The pool that our first midwife had was a lot bigger than what our second midwife had. And so I felt like I was just kind of like floating in there. Like I didn't have any stability. So I like asked my husband to get in with me, which he also was not anticipating. And he just like got down into his underwear in front of like these three other women. And he like, after, he's like, I would have put swim trunks on if I knew I was going to be getting in the pool. So he got in with me and was just kind of like holding me up while I was going through contractions. The doula was trying to like give me like some bites of food or like spoonfuls of honey and electrolytes. And I just did not want anything, because anytime I would eat or drink anything, I would immediately throw up. And it was really hard to be like throwing up while also having a contraction. I had also watched like a lot of badass mother birthers, like birth videos, like my whole pregnancy. But with my second pregnancy, I'm like, I'm not watching those like 2 weeks before, because with my first one, I had watched a video of this woman pushing out her baby, and her anus was like dilated, like 3 inches, and like all very normal, but it was like stuck in my brain, and that's all I could see. And I was having like a lot of anal pressure, and I was just so scared, because I'm like, this isn't right. So like the baby's gonna come out of my butt. I was starting to get really scared because it was going fine, and then that visual and everything was just not helpful. So then Margot suggested, she's like, how about you go sit on the toilet? That can be helpful to get baby to, get into a better position or anything. And I sat on the toilet for like one, and like, nope, I hate this. I'm not doing this. And I was like, can you check me? Because she'd listened with the Doppler a couple times, but she hadn't like checked me or anything. And I was like, I know it's going to tell me how dilated I am at that moment. But like, if I'm at a 1, or like, I might have to reconsider, something. And so I went and laid on her couch, and she's like, Allie, the baby's head is right there. Like it was like fingertip. And I don't know why I didn't think to like check myself, but I was just like, okay, I can do this. Like, I'm not getting into a car at this point. So like, I can do this. So I went back into the pool, and the pool felt amazing. It took a lot of like the discomfort away. We had our fan going. It was March in Minnesota, so it had been like cold all winter, but the sun was shining, and it was just like, it was lovely. It felt so good, but it wasn't helping things progress because I was like way too relaxed. And they're like, talk to your baby, and help, maybe that can help, him come out or them come out. And I was just so frustrated. I'm like, get the F out. And like, no sweetness, no anything. I'm like, I am done. Like, I'm done with this. And so she's like, okay, so I know you didn't like the toilet, but if you go and sit on that, it might help your baby come out within 15 minutes. She's like, it's usually really helpful for moms. I'm like, okay, like, I just want to be done. So I walk to the bathroom, and I try I sit on the toilet. It's awful again. I try all fours, leaning on the vanity, and my contractions got really spaced out at that point. And so they're like, we're going to shut the door with just you and Matt in there, just so you don't feel observed or anything. And immediately, like when the door clicked, my contractions picked up, and they were intense and coming back with like a vengeance. And the contractions were all like super low in my belly, and I I was tired. I hadn't really eaten. Anything I did eat, I had thrown up. It'd been about 12 hours at this point since my contractions had started. And I just decided in my own head, I was like, okay, the next one, I'm pushing the baby out. Like, I'm
Mhm.
not, I had no urge to push, but I was done. And so my husband was like kneeling in front of me and I like grabbed his shoulders. I was standing and I just pushed as hard as I could and like screamed and pushed the baby's head out. And
Mhm.
so while I was in labor, because I was so focused on like my anus, I had been putting pressure back on it because I'm like, if I don't push back, this baby's gonna come out. So like I had like pooped on my hand a little bit, and my husband,
Mhm.
that was what he was most worried about. He's like, blood, all that stuff, fine. He's like, I just don't want to see you poop. I don't want that. And poor guy, because I put my hand right on his shoulder, and he just like did not change expression because he's like, she is going through something right now. I have to buck up and let this happen. Of course, he tells me all that. Like, I'm not aware at this point that this is
Yeah.
happening. So I push Evander's head out, and then I think Matt or I like say that the head's out. So then Margot comes in to just assist, like if we need help catching the baby. So I put my foot up on the toilet. I'm kind of like in a Captain Morgan stance. She had to like
Mhm.
jump over my leg to get behind me because our bathroom's super small. And with the next surge, I pushed him out. And so 6:22 p.m., so about 12 hours after my contractions had started, Evander came out. And I just remember being in shock that there was a baby there. Like relief
Mhm.
that like labor was done, but like just like in shock, like what? There's a baby here. And then there was a lot of blood coming out. So they put like chucks under me and they're like, okay, we're gonna walk you back to the couch. We just want to monitor. There's a lot of blood. So my contractions completely stopped after that. I wasn't having any surges to help with the placenta coming out.
Mhm.
And so Margot's like, you're bleeding more than we'd like, so we're going to try some things. They gave me some herbs. They gave me Cytotec. She massaged my uterus. She tried light traction. She's like, it could just be like stuck right inside and just needs to be kind of finagled out. And nothing, it wasn't coming out. I was starting to feel kind of cold and my pulse was elevated. And so
Mhm.
she made the call. It was like about an hour after Evander was born. My placenta still hadn't come out. And she's like, I'm going to call the EMTs. They might stabilize you here or they might bring you in. So this was March of 2021. So we're still like in the midst of COVID stuff. So the EMTs came and they decided that I was going to go, but nobody could go with me. So my doula, my husband, no, I had to go by myself. I was in like kind of like a soft sling thing that they carried me out in. And I was like vomiting and hemorrhaging. And I just remember I was so cold that I was like grateful to be like in this pool of body fluid as they were like carrying me out. They brought me to the hospital. I never passed out. I was never like, I was cold. And then
Mhm.
my vitals weren't great. So I went to the ER and then Matt followed with our doula, Andy Vander, and met me at the ER. And so this is kind of where like the trauma started for me as far as it's the transfer. It wasn't the hemorrhage or anything like that. But so
Mhm.
Matt, he gets to the ER and they make him go into a family consult room. So he had said like who he was there for. And then they looked at the baby. They're like, who's this? And he's like, the baby she just had, like
Mhm.
has blood on his face still. So they go to a family consult room. And Matt's sister had passed away the year prior. And so for him, being separated from the normal ER waiting room was like a red flag for something isn't right. And he thought
Mhm.
I was dying or dead. And he was in his mind, he's like, I'm going to have to tell her parents. I'm going to have to raise this baby on my own. And he started having a panic attack. And our
Mhm.
doula, who is like this very calm, like quiet spoken, like hippie lady, went out and yelled at the front desk and was like, you need to tell him something. Like, you just
Mhm.
give him an update. And they're like, oh, yeah, she's fine. She's fine. Your baby just doesn't have a mask on. So that's why we put you. And they're just like, so Matt, like, of course, was relieved, but he was still just like reeling from the last hour, you know.
Mhm.
Well, I'm in the ER. I have like 6 or 7 people in there with me. I'm completely naked. I have 2 nurses holding my arms down because I was shaking too bad for them to get like my vitals. I have 2 nurses holding my legs up and out. They gave me a shot of Pitocin and then my placenta came out immediately. Nobody was really talking to me or like explaining anything. And then I was kind of having like the fawning response where I was trying to make everybody laugh and like, can we make this feel less serious because it's kind of freaking me out how serious everybody was. And the OB kind of made like a comment of like, this is why we don't really like home birth because this is
Mm,
what we see, which just like sucked to hear because
mhm,
I just had my baby at home. I just worked really hard.
mhm,
And then they stitched me up without consent. And at that point, it'd been probably like 90 minutes since Evander was born. So, like,
mhm,
I was swollen. I didn't have any of like the endorphins running through me. So it was really painful. I just had to keep asking them for lidocaine because I could feel every stitch. And then I had a second degree tear. And then there was like some miscommunication between like the ER and then the OB floor because they're like, well, your baby can't stay with you in the hospital.
mm,
And I was like, but I want to breastfeed. They're like, oh, we'll just give you a pump. And I was just like, like, how is this even the option? Because I just
mhm,
had him. And I was thinking, I was like, am I going to go AMA and just leave? Because I'm not staying here without him. And so eventually they figured out that that was a miscommunication and told me, yeah, he can stay with you. So my hemoglobin, I think when I was like admitted or that night was 6.5. And then they think I lost between home, the ambulance, and the hospital. They think I lost about 1.5 to 2 liters of blood. Ended up with 2 transfusions, 2 iron drips. I had a catheter and leg pumps. So I had all these cords on me when I was in the hospital. And Matt had to like get up with Evander to bring him to me to breastfeed. I had to sign a form for him to just be in bed with me.
mhm.
And and then like 2 days after I had Evander, I went in for like a blood draw to see where my hemoglobin is. And the finger poke they did came in way lower. It was
Mm,
higher than what they discharged me with, but it was lower than they wanted. And then they
yeah.
sent me to the OB floor. And then it was higher, but the OB was like, I really want you to stay. And I wish I
Mm,
would have just gotten the transfusion, the second one, and left. But I stayed another night, which sucked.
mhm,
And then my postpartum was really hard, I think, partly due to the blood loss, but I also, like, my in laws came like 4 days after Evander was born and stayed with us for a few days. And I'm not super close with my mother in law. And so it just was a lot more stress. I just felt just disconnected from everything. I bled for 10 weeks after Evander
mhm,
was born. I had some postpartum anxiety like 6 months after he was born, but it just wasn't what I wanted. So then
mhm,
when like Evander was healthy, everything was good. I was like, I want to do a home birth for my second one. And
mm,
everyone was like shocked because they're like, the first one was so bad. And I was like, but it wasn't. It wasn't bad.
mhm.
The hospital was bad. The
Yeah.
birth itself wasn't. And
Mhm,
yeah, so that was my first one.
mhm. Yeah, definitely. And so afterwards, was there any kind of thing that you did to heal from that experience? Was there anyone that you talked to? Was there anything that you did to prepare for another home birth because you did kind of have that experience with the first? What did you do in that period?
Yeah, so I feel like the hospital is where the trauma was. So my plan for the second was like, if I can avoid that place as
Mhm,
much as I can, then I won't have a negative experience again. I felt some feelings about my placenta because I was just like, why didn't you just come out? Like,
mhm,
if you had just come out, we wouldn't have been in this situation. And I had listened to I don't remember. It was some podcast and it was talking about the placenta being your baby's first mother and how it's kind of like this selfless organ. Like it does all this work to just like be, waste at the end of it. It's not
mhm,
kept alive. And so I felt like that made me like forgive my placenta and just realize like, okay, this might be like the birth that Evander chose or was chosen for me so that it's part of my story so that I can do better the second time or focus my like attention on something different the second time.
mhm,
So I got pregnant when Evander was like a year and a half or so,
mhm,
intentionally. And I actually right before I got pregnant, I was jumping around with him and I felt like something like coming out of my vagina and I thought I was having like a
Mhm.
prolapse.
Yeah.
And I went into St. Luke's, which is the first hospital I went to for his birth. And I said that I did not want to see the OB that had been really dismissive and kind of like fear mongering with me with his birth. And the nurse practitioner is like, yeah, this does look like a Gartner cyst. And I was like, yep, I've read some things where they can drain it, and I'm like, it's really important to me to have a vaginal birth. And they're somewhat rare to have these Gartner cysts. They're just like something that should have been closed off before I was born, and it just didn't. And due to like vaginal trauma, can cause like fluid to build.
Mm.
And they're like, well, we have to ask the OB. They asked the OB, and it was the one I didn't want to like consult on anything. And she said, we won't do anything. It'll probably just tear off your vaginal wall and leave you with a laceration. And that just wasn't a good answer for me.
Mhm.
So I called the other hospital in town and I was like, so here's the thing. This is what they told me. This is my experience with this hospital. I'm like, I need someone that's at least going to listen to me. I understand if they're like their professional opinion is to leave it, but that doesn't feel right to me. And she's like, okay, I'll set you up with this OB. She's was really great. And that OB like immediately was like, oh yeah, I can drain it right now. And so I was just like, so was that even your professional opinion or is this still like punishment for choosing something different?
Mhm.
And so I was like, when I get pregnant, I will do my 20-week with this OB because I still wanted to do a 20-week, but it was like nice that she actually seemed to be looking out for me instead of having her own biases.
Yeah.
So in preparation, when I found out I was pregnant, we called the midwife that we had with Evander again, Margot, and hired her again. But I prepared way differently because I already felt like I had read a lot and instead I like
Mhm.
turned inward to prepare. So I was trying to like focus more on my intuition, spend more time listening to my baby and not so much on like outside information. I still love listening to birth story podcasts, but I wasn't like
Mhm.
reading, you know, things. I took different supplements this time. So I took desiccated beef liver instead of like a traditional prenatal. And then towards the end of my pregnancy, I took iron and liquid chlorophyll to help boost my hemoglobin and ferritin because we were going into this birth thinking, okay, I'm going to hemorrhage again. So how do I set up my body to be the healthiest it can be to handle that? I ate a
Yeah.
lot of red meat. I ate 100 grams of protein a day or tried my best to. And basically just was not scared of hemorrhaging because I'm like, but my body's going to be healthier this time. It's going to be able to handle the blood loss. So I had my 20-week ultrasound with the new OB. Everything looked great. And of course, she's just like, we have a birthing center here. And I was like, nope, I'm going forward with my home birth. She's like, okay. Like she didn't necessarily
Mhm.
support it, but she didn't try to scare me away you know, from it, which I really appreciated.
Yeah.
And then at 32 weeks pregnant, my midwife sent me an email and she said, call me when you have time.
Mm.
And I immediately got really nervous because I'm like, what is happening? And she said, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to attend your birth because I'm moving. She recently had some like personal stuff come up and she just didn't have the childcare to be able to be on call, which I like totally support her decision. But it was just a bummer for us because I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
32 weeks pregnant. How am I going to find a traditional unlicensed midwife that aligns with us like this late? Like they're probably all full. And so Margot said, there's a couple that she's already reached out to. She's like, they have room for you. So Alicia was one, and then Rebecca was the other. And we called Rebecca, and we loved her right away. And we're like, yeah, we're gonna go with you. And
Mhm.
she's done like a lot of training with like Dr. Stu. She like delivered babies in Haiti with him. She delivers a lot of Amish babies. So she like
Mm.
delivers babies in situations where a hospital isn't readily available. And so she has
Yeah.
to be highly, highly trained. And also she's unlicensed and traditional, which I loved. And so then we actually had Alicia was her assist. And usually
Mm.
Alicia only assists her for breech and twins,
Mhm.
but Alicia takes these beautiful photos and I really wanted photos of the birth. So I was really grateful that she agreed to like do the assist. And then the one appointment that Alicia came, the prenatal one, they thought the baby was breech. And so I was like,
Mm.
this is why Margot couldn't take us and why you two are my new midwives because the baby's breech. And I wasn't worried about it. I was just, yeah, I wasn't worried. But it turned out he was just like kind of tucked on my right side.
Mm.
Um, and they're like, that's not like the best positioning for him, but we didn't know he was a boy, but like, baby will come how the baby comes. Like, your body's smart, their body's smart. We'll figure it out. And then I did way more intentional birth space prep this time. I had like a mother's blessing with some of my close friends. So they made like birth affirmations for me that I hung up. I had like my salt lamp and Palo Santo and just like more things that I felt like would make this labor and birth like more of um, a spiritual thing than just like plainly like go and do it like an animal,
Mhm.
I guess. So around like 36 or 37 weeks, I was having like really intense Braxton Hicks, like anytime I was moving too much, which is basically all day when you have like a 2 year old. And we were actually trying to purchase my vehicle at the time. We had been leasing it. So I was like, it was this whole mess. I was back and forth from the DMV to the bank like the day before I went into labor and just like contracting, like I'm leaning over the counter and
Mhm.
like I'm like, I just need to get this done before the baby comes. Um, I had also done like a lot more prep, like with postpartum meal prepping, especially having like a toddler now. And then we had prepped him for the birth as well. So
Mhm.
we watched a lot of birth videos, especially ones that didn't have music over them, that had like the real sounds. And he loved watching birth videos. If I'd be watching them on my own and he'd hear like a woman vocalizing, he would like come in like, oh, is she pushing a baby out? It was so sweet. And then we read this book quite often called My Mother is the Strongest. And
Mm.
it's a home birth book for kids.
Mhm.
And we practiced like making, I don't remember what he called them, if they were polar bear sounds or something, but we practiced
Mm.
making these sounds because I didn't want him to be worried if he heard me making sounds that I don't normally make. And then, yeah, we're like, my mom is going to come up and watch him, like if for some reason he couldn't. I didn't want Matt to have to worry about him, but I wanted him to see the birth if he felt comfortable doing that. So at around, oh, and I also avoided videos of like buttholes like at the end because I did not want that in my head again. So then I was a day before 38 weeks, no, a day before 39 weeks. I was in bed with Evander. My husband comes home around like 10:30 at night from work and I was just wired. And I worked the next day. So this was a Thursday night. I worked the next morning. And I usually would have just try to lay in bed and fall asleep because I'd have to be up early for work. But I just felt I don't have much time left with like a family of the three of us. So I went downstairs and hung out with my husband and we watched a movie and I was looking up boy names because we still didn't have a boy's name picked out. We had our girl's name. And then I always feel so calm before I go into labor. I noticed it like in hindsight, that I felt so calm, but yeah,
Mhm.
I felt ready whenever the baby decided that they were ready. And then I was like, I should go to bed. So I went to the bathroom. And then I was walking back into the living room. I felt like a trickle down my legs. And I was like, oh, is that just, end of pregnancy? It could be anything. I was like, oh, I wonder what that is. So I went back to the bathroom to make sure my bladder was empty, and it was. And then when I was walking back in the living room, I did like a little jump, and then some more liquid came out. And I told my, I'm like, I think my water's leaking. So I texted my boss, and she was just going to take care of my clients in the morning and just let the midwife know because she's about an hour from us.
Okay.
Um, so I just wanted to give her like a heads up. And I didn't call her, I just text her. I was like, I'm not thinking this is going to happen soon. So then I ended up going to bed and snuggling my toddler, who is going to be not the only child anymore. And
Mhm.
my water was trickling out like all night long. Around 4 a.m., I woke up, and this is where I, like, in hindsight, looking at my previous birth, I knew where I could have done better. So instead of eating
Mm.
toast for breakfast, I went down and ate venison and cheese and tried to focus on protein and like eating little snacks and fueling my body for like the labor ahead. Uh,
Mhm.
and then I went and took a shower and I braided my hair back so that I was just like, I was ready whenever things started to get more intense. And I labored in a separate room with my dog. She's had puppies before, so she's kind of like a little doggy doula and just likes to be close to
Mhm.
me when I'm laboring, which is really sweet. I called my mom around 7 a.m. and she's an hour away as well. And I was just like, okay, I think labor's starting. So no rush to get here, but just make your way up here whenever you're ready. And my contractions completely stopped when I was on the phone with her. And I think it was just
Mm.
my body being like, we don't want her to worry or speed up here. Then
Mm-hmm.
when I got off the phone with her, they started again. And I went and woke up Matt and Evander. And when we told Evander, like, the baby's coming today, he like started crying. And it was just
Oh,
so, it was like he was having like this emotional like release, you know? It was really sweet. And so this time too, I was like, Matt is capable and I trust him. And I'm just going to focus on laboring and he can get Evander ready for the day. He can set things up. I'm
mm-hmm.
just going to stay in my dark room. I sat on like a birthing ball and kind of swayed and bounced on that and just didn't worry about anything else, but just like focusing inward. And then I had called Rebecca also, like after I talked to Matt, and I was sending her like contraction app, like screenshots, so she kind of knew where I was at.
Yeah.
Um, and then, so I was upstairs in our room and I felt like I had to clear out. And so I went downstairs because we have a bidet downstairs. So I'm like, well, I want to use
Mm,
that. And I went to the bathroom and then I had three really hard contractions, like one after another that like dropped me to my knees. And I like had to
mm,
crawl up the steps. And the midwives are already on their way, but I kind of got freaked out because I'm like, this is happening too fast.
mm.
And I was going to put off getting into the pool as long as I could because I didn't want it to relax me too much. And so I
Yeah.
went into the bathtub. I'm like, I just need like 10 minutes to like slow this down. So I went in the bathtub for a little bit and then that did help. Things went back to like the normal pace that they were at. And then my mom was there, so she took over with Evander. There was a moment when my mom came into the room and she's like, "Do you know where Evander is?" Like, asked Matt. And Matt's like, "No." She's like, "I went to the bathroom and he's gone." And I was just like, "Can't care about this. Can't care about
Yeah.
this." And I guess he was just like, Matt was like looking down the street for him because he had recently figured out how to open our front door. And he was like in a corner in a dinosaur costume. Like, they just weren't looking for a little green dino. So it's really cute. Some of our birth photos are like Evander coloring, and he just looks like a dinosaur costume, and I'm like laboring like behind him. So I was just in our room in the dark. Matt was staying with me. It helped to just have him, like, I'd be hanging on like his shoulders, and he wasn't really doing any counter pressure or anything, but just like the physical touch of him, like, really helped things feel better. I wouldn't
Hmm.
say like my contractions were painful. It was just like intense. And I just kept focusing inward on like what my baby was doing and focusing on like my birth canal not being anatomically correct. I just pictured this wide open space where the baby just had this full movement, nothing was in their way. And that really helped, like that visualization of
Hmm.
like no restrictions. And then the midwives came. We have like really creaky stairs, and midwives are so quiet. Like, I didn't even really hear them coming up the stairs. And they
Hmm.
watched me have a couple contractions and listened with the Doppler to baby's heartbeat, and everything sounded good. And they just went back downstairs and let Matt stay with me. And then I felt like a slam. Like, it felt like the baby dropped from super high and like banged into my pelvis. And then I couldn't sit on the ball anymore. So I got up into bed in kind of like a reclined position. And they had asked me if I wanted the pool yet. And I was like, not yet. But then when those started, I was like, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready for it now. Matt was going to go to the bathroom. He's like, when I'm done, I'll come and I'll help you down the steps. Well, I knew I didn't want to have another contraction on the landing like I had with Evander. So as soon as my contraction ended, I bolted down the steps, like, didn't even wait for him. And he felt bad. He's like, I was going to help you. I was like, I didn't have time to wait. Sprinted down the steps and threw myself in the pool. And it felt so good. Her pool was smaller too, so I felt like I could stabilize myself a lot better in there. So Matt didn't have to get in with me, which was nice. Evander was just coloring and like, just like, oh, my mom does this every day. Like, was not fake at all. There's a few times he said, Mama's working so hard to get the baby out, which was so
Oh.
sweet. It was so
Hmm.
sweet. And then in the pool, I puked one time, just like unexpected. And my husband said, he's like, it was so crazy. Right after you puked, your face changed and your pupils got super big. Like, I couldn't even see your irises. And I think that's when I kind of like left my body type, like I was going to go get my baby. I was still working through the contractions, but it was just like so different from my first. And
Hmm.
I was really just working with my body. I was letting my body lead and only assisting where it felt like they needed me to assist. And then the next surge after that it was like my whole body, like involuntarily, just like like convulsed. And I thought for sure I was going to have the fetal ejection reflex because it was just so wild. And I felt like I was like, I think I have that pushing feeling that I didn't get with my first. So I was
Mm,
kind of laying on my left side in the pool. And just when I would feel like I needed to push, I would. I felt my son like completely descend down, which was like
mm,
super cool to feel. And then I got like a real big urge to push. And it was like I zapped back into my body. And between the surges, I told my midwives, like, I don't think I'm stretching because I was really worried about tearing again. And they're like, you are stretching. Your body's doing an amazing job. And like, I didn't feel with Evander, like his head coming out. But
mm,
with Oz, I did. And it was just so bizarre. And I didn't think it was necessarily helpful for me because
mm,
I just, like, I was like, I just need to like imagine myself stretching instead of feeling this. And then I was pretty silent through my whole labor. I would do like low humming or like telling my body I was going soft and open and like telling my baby they're doing a good job instead of get the F out. And so I was just trying to just be way more intentional. I wanted this baby's their experience to be positive. And so I had like two pushes where I roared and his head popped out, and immediately the pool started filling with blood. But
mm,
the midwives were calm. So I felt calm. I called to my mom to come downstairs with Evander. So she was holding him. And on the birth video, you can hear him. He's like, look, there's sparkles, which I still
mm,
don't know what he was seeing, but whatever his little toddler eyes were seeing, it was magic. And then I could feel him as he was rotating, I could feel him kicking like
mm,
high up in my belly. And then after a couple beats, I got the urge to push and I pushed the rest of him out. And it was really hard to see under the water because there was so much blood. And so I pulled him up right away. He was kind of tangled. So I had to push like my hips up out of the water to untangle him. And he was so cheesy, like just
mm,
covered in vernix. And I pulled him up to my chest, and the midwives like gave me a couple minutes to sit where we could all meet, you know, the new baby as a family. And then Rebecca's like, okay, I'd like to help you out of the pool. We'd like to manage this bleeding and just see what's happening. And I did not feel worried just because like their demeanor was so calm and
mm,
I fully trusted them. And so Oz was born at 12:44 p.m. So it was about 8 hours of labor with him. And then I laid on some chucks on the couch and I just felt calm. My placenta wasn't coming out. I wasn't having contractions. So they gave me herbs. I didn't get Cytotec this time, but they just kept giving me tea with tinctures in it. And eventually my placenta came out. And there's this photo of like Rebecca helping like deliver the placenta. And it's like pure bliss. And I told
mm.
her, I was like, I feel way more proud of that placenta coming out than I did of birthing like a whole human, like a few minutes before then. So then they had guessed at that point that I'd lost around 1,200 cc's of blood. They kept giving me herbs to try to slow things down. I didn't tear because I asked them, like, how bad did I tear? And Rebecca's like, you didn't. Like, everything is great. And I was just like, I felt so victorious. Like, I'm like, this like heals everything from like my
Mm,
first. And so I'd actually taken out cinnamon rolls that I had frozen in the morning when my labor started. So my husband threw those in the oven because I wanted it to be like the birthday like cake for our son. So like the morning
mhm,
was like sunny and beautiful, and it smelled like this beautiful sweet new baby and cinnamon rolls and Palo Santo, and it was just like, oh, it was so good. And then they went over the placenta with me, and they're like, it looks like you're missing some of your bag. So like that might come out, you know, in the next couple of days. So just like inspect any blood clots that you get. And it did end up coming out a couple of days later. My husband, so this was a Friday. My husband then decided to call the internet guy because our internet had gone out. And
mm.
so like I'm laying on the couch under towels with a bloody baby, and like the internet guy comes in to fix our router. I was just like, Matt's just like, it was easy. Like, we're done. He's super like pro home birth, which I think is super.
Oh.
He tells all his friends, he's like, it's really dad friendly. And then the midwives left a couple of hours later, and they just said, if you pass anything bigger than like a golf ball size blood clot, just let us know. So, and they had me peeing in a bucket because they didn't want me to walk too far with all the blood loss. And
Mm,
so I got up off the couch to pee in this bucket, and I felt like something slip out of me and
Mhm.
splash into the bucket. And when I looked, it was like a gigantic, like softball sized blood clot.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, that's a lot bigger than a golf ball. So I sent my
Yeah.
parents a picture and she was like, how do you feel? And I was like, I feel great. I feel fine. And she's like, well, just let us know. She's like, it could have been if your bladder was full. Like the blood was just coagulating inside your body. Yeah, and they checked my hemoglobin the next day and it was still a 12.1 even
Mm.
after all that blood loss and that massive blood clot. So I had really prepped my body to avoid transfusions and a transfer and all that stuff. I really focused on the 555 for this postpartum. So I stayed in bed with my baby, did skin to skin. The only time I really got out of bed was to sit like in the sun with him and we
Mm.
were both like naked. And then, so my first, I bled for 10 weeks. And with my second, I bled for 9 days. And
Wow.
yeah, and I was like, that rest really helped. And then my son ended up having like colic pretty bad. The first
Mm.
week was like bliss. And then he just would scream for like 2 to 4 hours at a time. So we brought him in for cranial sacral and chiropractic, and that really helped. But yeah, it was just like my first birth was beautiful because it was what brought my son to me. And I feel like it was kind of like a baptism through fire with him. And
Mm.
it taught me the stuff that I wasn't necessarily focusing on. And I think because I had that experience, it helped me learn things differently and to reevaluate how I was handling my pregnancies. So now with this third one, I'm doing the same things with the desiccated beef liver and 100 grams of protein and being more intentional with connecting with my baby. And because my second birth was like, I honestly, aside from the three contractions when I was going up the stairs, was like pain free. It was
Mm.
intense, but it was so good. It was
Mhm.
so good. I like after he was born, I'm like, I could do this again, like today. Yeah.
That's amazing. Wow. I love how you shared kind of the things that you prepared after learning from the first birth, because something similar happened to me where I did hemorrhage in the hospital with my first. I didn't end up needing transfusions. They said I was like borderline to needing them, but I did prepare with my home birth, like with herbs and things like that to take after the hemorrhage. But I didn't prepare myself before the pregnancy, like during the pregnancy, um, to prep my body to either not hemorrhage or be able to handle the hemorrhage or anything like that. I just had all the prep for like if a hemorrhage happens, I have all this stuff. And I ended up almost passing out. I got up too soon and wanted to like walk to the bathroom and shower. And right then and there, when I got to the bathroom, I turned like super pale. I felt really dizzy. I told my mom and my doula, like, I need to sit down because I don't feel okay right now. And they sat me down and gave me a bunch of like herbs and electrolytes and like an energy bar or something. They just gave me a lot to kind of replenish me. And after I got all of that, I like got my color back and I was perfectly fine. But that taught me a lot too, as to like, no, I need to prep my body during pregnancy for this. I don't need like the prep afterwards is good too to have, obviously, but it's like all together as a whole what you need to be prepared for, not just kind of having everything afterwards. So I did do that with my third, also the desiccated beef liver. I did like nettle tea and then the iron at the end of pregnancy too. And with that one, my third, I bled just like a little bit of blood after she came out. And that was the only bleeding that I had. There was
Amazing.
like no blood after that. I did have some bleeding, obviously postpartum, like it was very normal, like minimal bleeding, but the blood loss right after birth was just like barely even there.
Yeah.
And it was insane.
That's what I love about home birth too, is it seems like they don't want bad outcomes. They don't want emergencies, like they can handle them if it happens, but they don't want that. And so like
Hmm.
they're preparing you for like the best possible outcome. Where with like OBs, they have all the safety nets. Like we have a NICU, we have cesareans, we have all this stuff. So like do whatever you want, do the
Hmm.
testing that we want you to do, but like we don't care what you're eating or what, how you're preparing your body. And that's what even my friends who are like planning hospital births. I'm like, I know midwives that do prenatal care for people who aren't birthing with them. I'm like, you should do that because it's vastly different. Like 90 minutes
Hmm.
of talking with your provider versus 15 minutes, and they're navigating like how to prevent something that happened to your birth before, or like to work with your labs to get things better. Like my midwife
Hmm.
now, Rebecca, she's done craniosacral training since my last birth. And so she's been doing craniosacral training, or craniosacral on me, and just like opening up my fascia, and it's so, I like, no matter how many times you have a baby, it's your one chance. It's your one time being pregnant with this child and having your labor and birth with this child. And you should be
Hmm.
putting all this energy and focus and intention because this is your one shot at it. And even if
Hmm.
like my first one ended in a transfer, but it's still like that's our story, and
Hmm.
that's the only one I have for him, you know? So to
Hmm.
like go into it with that mentality instead of like I'm just going to see what happens, you know.
Yeah. Hmm.
So we
Yeah.
have
Thank you.
Rebecca for our third one now, and
Yeah.
it'll be our last baby, but I'm just so excited.
Hmm. Yeah. That's so amazing. I love everything that you shared, and I'm so glad that you were able to kind of heal that experience, it sounds like, with your birth that you had. And it just sounds so magical too, how you said your son kind of saw sparkles. I feel like maybe he was seeing like the birth portal being opened
Yeah,
because baby was about to be born. And that's just really special and magical. So I really love that.
yeah, he wants to. He's 4 now, and so I've like asked him. I'm like, "Do you want to see this baby be born?" And he he loves. It's so funny because he wants to be there for me, but then my husband asked him recently if he wanted to get married someday, and Evander's like, "No, I don't want to watch my wife. I don't want to sit around all day and watch my wife poop out babies." And Matt's like, "Yes, that's what husbands do. We just sit around all day." But he was just, yeah, I think for him, you know, if he decides to have children someday, to have these experiences and this normalcy of birth and how strong women are. And yeah, like this, because we've talked about, like when I was showing him the videos, I'm like, there's going to be blood, but it doesn't mean I'm hurt, you know, like it's
Hmm.
normal. And he was just like completely unfazed by it. He was just like, yeah, this just
Yeah.
happens. And now
Hmm.
we don't know what we're having with this baby. We're going to wait till they're born. But Evander's so sure it's a girl. And
Mm.
part of me, like most of me, trusts that he knows what it is because he seems so in tune. You know, like
Hmm.
in the sparkles after Oz was born, he was the only one that thought Oz was a boy too. He thought
Mm.
everyone else thought I was having a girl. And Evander's like, no, it's a brother. And he
Mm.
was right. He's just a magical little kid.
Yeah. That's amazing. And so you said that you do work with mamas as well.
Yeah,
So,
I do prenatal
mhm,
massages, and then postpartum. I just tell them as soon as you feel comfortable to like leave your
mhm,
house, which I'm not encouraging to do right away, you know. But
mhm,
yeah, in massage school, they really scare you about prenatal massages. They're like you could put someone into labor and you could do all these
mhm,
things. And since I've had babies, like even with all my research before, I still felt really nervous about prenatals because it was foreign to me. But
mm,
since I've had babies, they're my favorite. And most of my
mm,
clients like are asking me questions. And I do say, I'm like, I'm not a birth worker. I'm not like, I just read a lot. I listen a lot. And some of my clients have said, they're like, their birth was different because of the advice that I gave them, either for their postpartum or things to look into, never telling them
mhm,
what to do, but just saying, like, this is what I did. Here are my two experiences. And so it might be something you want to ask your provider or look into yourself. So yeah,
mhm.
I massage like all types of bodies, but prenatal people are like one of my favorites.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And do you have like a page or website where people can find you?
Yeah. So I have my personal Instagram. I don't post anything on there. I just like follow it for like motherhood and birth, like education type stuff. So that's
Mhm,
just my name, Ali Sarberg. And then I work at Infinity Massage and Wellness in Duluth, Minnesota. We have like 50 massage therapists there. But if anyone local is looking for prenatal massages or just want to connect, I'm more than happy to do that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing
Yeah.
all of your stories with us. It was great having you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was really an honor to be able to share the boys' stories with everybody.
As a doula, I serve women who want to have a physiological and intuitive birth. Women who are ready to take radical responsibility for their birth and want to be the authority in their birth. This is not a job or career for me. This is much bigger, something deeper. This is soul work, my ultimate passion, because I trust women and I trust birth. I have both in-person and virtual offerings available, including birth services, birth circles, courses, mentorships, freebies, and much more. For more information on everything that I offer, the link is down below in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd love for you to share with any family or friends who may benefit from these stories and experiences. To further support this podcast, I'd appreciate if you would leave a 5-star rating and review, or you can even make a loving donation on my website at birthsathome.com/products/podcast-donation. Tune in next week for another home birth story.